Hello everybody and welcome back to Advanced Maths. Today we talk about inverse functions. So you should already know what a function is, but today we're going to look at what an inverse function is. And what an inverse function does is it does the opposite of a normal function. So for example, if I had the inverse of f, well the f of 5 is 13. So if I put 5 into f, I get 13 out. And what the inverse will do is it'll take the answer and give me the original number. So f of the inverse of f of 13 will give me 5. And so an inverse function just reverses a function. We'll look at some examples here. So if f of x was x squared, the inverse of that will be square root of x. If g of x was 5x minus 3, the inverse will be x plus 3 divided by 5. And then we've also got h of x over here, which is 9 over x. And the inverse of that is 9 over x as well. And that's called a self-inverse function. That is its own inverse. Okay, so just to show you here, if I put some numbers in, then these functions really just do undo each other. Just like that. Okay, so finding the inverse of a function. There are 4 steps. Step 1 is to write out the function as y equals f of x. Step 2, we're going to swap the x and y. Step 3, we're going to rearrange to make y the subject. And then step 4 is write as inverse of f is of x. Okay, so example 1, we're going to use those steps is we're going to find the inverse of f of x equals 3x minus 8. Okay, so step 1 we're going to write out as y equals f of x. So we can write y equals 3x minus 8. Step 2, we're going to swap the x's and y's like this. So the x has become y and the y has become x. And step 3, we're going to rearrange just with a bit of algebra. Going to get rid of the minus 8 by adding 8 to both sides. Get x plus 8 equals 3y. Going to get rid of times by 3 by dividing by 3. And get x plus 8 divided by 3 is equal to y. And then finally, step 4, we're going to write it as f of my inverse of x. Inverse of f is this. So we write f of minus 1 of x equals x plus 8 over 3. And we have finished. We have found the inverse of f of x. Now, the way to check this is just to put any random number into f of x and get an answer out. And hopefully, if you put that answer into the inverse, you'll get the original number out. So, for example, I'm going to choose the number 11, just a random number. I'm going to put 11 into f. 3 times 11 is 33 minus 8 would give me 25. So f of 11 is 25. And I'm going to take 25 and put it into the inverse. So the inverse of 25 is 25 plus 8 divided by 3, which is 33 divided by 3, which is indeed 11. Okay, so do you see what's happened here? The inverse function has undone the original function. And that's just an easy way to check that your inverse function is correct, just by making sure that it does reverse the original function. That's a really quick check you can do, especially if you have a calculator in your exams. Okay. So we can give ourselves a big tick because we got it correct and our check works. Now, example 2, we're going to find the inverse of the following functions. F of x equals x squared minus 5. So you remember step 1, we're going to write y equals x squared minus 5. We're going to swap the x's and y's. And then step 3, we're going to rearrange. We're going to add 5 to both sides. And then get rid of the squared by square rooting. We get square root of x plus 5 equals y. Very quickly, I can just check that it is the inverse function by putting a random number in. This time I put 10 in. So f of 10 is 10 squared minus 5, which is 100 minus 5, which is 95. If I put 95 into the inverse, I should get 10 out. So 95 plus 5 is 100, which and the square root of 100 is 10. Yes, it does work. It is the inverse of that function. Now we'll do it with g of x. So g of x equals x over 2x minus 8. I write y equals x over 2x minus 8. And I just rearrange. Sorry, first I swap the x's and y's. So it becomes like this, and now I rearrange. I get rid of the divide by 2y minus 8 by multiplying by 2y minus 8. I expand those brackets. And then I'm going to move all the x's to one side and all the y's to the other side. And it looks like this. I factorize. And then I divide by 2x minus 8. Okay, and I've rearranged to make y the subject of that formula. All that leaves me to do is just write it as inverse of g equals 8x over 2x minus 1. And I have finished. I've found the inverse function. Okay, now I will leave the check to you. So you've got these two functions here, and all I want you to do is check these are indeed each other's inverse. Choose a number to put into g, get an answer, put the answer into inverse of g, and see if you get the original number back out. Okay. So if you feel like you've understood today's video, you can try these practice questions here. However, if you'd like to re-watch any of the examples to really get an idea of what's going on, please rewind the video and try watching it again. Just a little tip here, if you've already got the inverse function, to find the original function, you just do the exact same method because the inverse of the inverse is the original function. So you're trying to fill in this table with the missing green values, green functions, just by finding the inverse of the functions on the screen. Okay, so pause the video and try this yourself. I'm going to reveal the answers in 3, 2, 1. How did you do? Did you get it right? Let me know how well you did in the comments. Thanks for watching this week's video from Advanced Maths. We have plenty more videos coming every week. So remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks for watching and good luck in your exams.